Well, it's the moment Liz Kendall's been waiting for. It's her Ask Me Anything round. Jeremy, you have the first question for Liz.
Okay, go for it, Jeremy.
Oh, Liz, we had a fascinating discussion the other night about the Middle East. I really enjoyed it. I think you enjoyed it as well. You seem to have doubts about the vote that we took in Parliament on recognition of Palestine, which the Labour Party eventually, Labour MPs, most of them, supported the recognition of the state of Palestine. Do you think it would be a good thing if, as our party, we said we will assist the Middle East peace process by giving recognition to Palestine in order to bring about a co-determination, to bring about a long-term peace and hopefully end the siege of Gaza and the occupation of the West Bank?
I believe in the dignity and justice of a Palestinian state, and the agony and suffering that the Palestinians are feeling is brutal and raw. And we know that the solution must be, in the end, a two-state solution, and that we must work with our international colleagues to make that.
So you would support recognition then?
I want to see two states.
But would you support recognition now?
I abstained in the vote in Parliament because...
There's a lot of abstaining going on, isn't there?
Yes, because I believe that negotiation is the way that we achieve it. But that cannot be sort of limitless, timeless negotiations. People feel angry about what's happening. So as Prime Minister,
what deadline would you give for a Palestinian state for an agreement to be reached before you'd say, well, we're going to recognise it now?
First of all, we have to get... At the moment, there is no trust. There's no trust on either side. Either that the ultimate solution is a two-state solution, or that there will be any kind of process whatsoever. And that's why people feel so angry and raw across the world. Okay. So you have to have... At the moment, I think we're in the appalling situation where on both sides, there's no room for the politicians to move on either of their sides, and there's no feeling that there's any commitment. Who's most to blame for that? You do not solve problems by apportioning blame. I think there have been huge mistakes on both sides.
Yeah, but it's not an equality of suffering, is it?
There is huge suffering amongst the Palestinians. And I also understand Israelis feeling deeply worried about the rockets too. Quite clearly the illegal settlements are utterly wrong. At the moment, though, we are so far away from this. I understand people's real passion about wanting to get that negotiated solution. We have to move on. Yvette, your question for Liz, please.
Some of the tax credit changes and cuts that you said that you would support will probably make people worse off in work. Given the importance of work incentives, why would you support them? Well,
I've explicitly said that I do not support the cuts to working tax credits. They hit 3 million people, costing them over £1,000 a year. But I've actually set out a solution for that, which is to look at the £100 billion a year that we spend on tax relief. That's a bigger proportion of GDP than we spend on the entire working age welfare budget.
What tax relief would you like to axe then?
Well, Margaret Hodge is going to be looking at all of that for me. I mean, there are some that are great and really work, but others, like things like late night taxi relief, right? If you work a shift, you're a shift worker, you can't claim that back. 90% of it goes to people working in big city law firms. I think that's wrong. There's a whole bunch of them that we could look at. But I think we have to set out, and I think we have to... We feel angry about these changes, but if we want people to trust us with their money and on the economy, would have to show how we would set out an alternative.
And would you extend that to the family size policy and also to the freeze, the 5-year freeze in tax credits and other policies as well? Or is it just
my priority,
particular tax credits ones that you would oppose?
My priority, I think, for us as a party is the working tax credits. We have to have strong incentives for people to work and give them support. I think the tapers that are being introduced are a massive work disincentive, and we want to be the party for working people, and we should put that right.
OK, Andy Burnham.
I'd say it's typical you, Ian, making us do this. It's really your...
Well, don't you find this actually more invigorating than doing what you've been doing before? Yeah. Carry on.
I will. OK.
I think you imagine we don't debate with each other all the time in a friendly...
And we have debated before, Liz, haven't we?
Go on,
Liz and I have debated NHS policy in the past. And I've said earlier that I don't doubt your commitment to the NHS, but we do have a disagreement about the extent of private sector involvement. So my question is, what, if any, limit do you see on private sector involvement in the NHS?
Oh, God. But private privatising health services isn't going to be the way that we get the massive changes we need in the NHS. You know this. You know, our ageing population, more people living with long-term conditions. But what I did do is defend what we did in government. Our independent sector treatment centres, which helped bring the waiting times down. And I remember being with, you might even know him, I won't give his name, a very senior person in the BMA who came up to me and said, you people have brought in one of these independent sector treatment centres down the road from me. So I'm now going to have to go and talk to my GP colleagues, get the waiting list down and stop doing so much private practice. And I say, good for us.
But would you support what the coalition say, any qualified provider? Or do you have a policy of, like I do, NHS preferred provider?
Oh God, the NHS is always going to be our preferred provider of healthcare.
Is that always the case?
But Andy has put a limit, I think I'm right in saying, on the amount of private sector involvement in the NHS. I think you don't want it to go above what it is now, sort of 5 to 6%. Would you agree with that limit, or would you put a higher limit?
This is a sort of false set of arguments here. I don't think there's a difference. And in fact, in my own patch in the East Midlands, I would rather that the private contract for Arriva on patient transport services was actually removed because they're providing an appalling
before the election, you said, I think you commented on our health policy and said what matters is what works, and we shouldn't have a principal position giving the public NHS preeminence. And I'm just interested that you've kind of slightly changed that tonight.
I said what matters is what works. I didn't say the rest of those words that you said. And quite frankly, if we're a party that doesn't believe in what works, we're dead and buried.
But the public NHS is what works, isn't it?
Of course it does. It provides incredible care, but it needs to improve. It needs to improve, and we need big reforms. And I'm not going to rule out things like what we did with the independent sector treatment centres. They worked, and I'm pretty proud that we got the waiting times down from 18 months to 18 weeks, and the ISTC's played a role. And I'm very happy to champion that achievement.
Liz, thank you very much.
The thing I've been worrying about is if they're going to run the trains 24 hours at the weekends.
Yes.
When are they going to do the maintenance? Because they can't cope with the maintenance now. So with extra running.
Yeah.